Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha
Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha
Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha
Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja
Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja
Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja Yamunatira Vanachari
Yamunatira
Yamunatira Vanachari
Yamunatira
Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari
Jaya
Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari
Jaya Radha
Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari
Gopi Jana
Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari
Gopi Jana Girivardhari
Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja
Yodanandana Vrajajanaranja
Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja
Yodanandana Vrajajanaranja
Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranja
Yodanandana Vrajajanaranja
Yamunatira Vanachari
Yamunatira
Yamunatira
Vanachari
Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari
Jaya Radha
Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada
Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada
Nitai Gora Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gora Hari Bol
Nitai Gora Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gora Hari Bol
Shri Kodnitai Nagara Shashi Ki
Jai.
Srinath Maharaj Ki
Jai.
Shri Giridhara Ki Shri Nisindev Bhavan Ki Shri Prabhupada Ki Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Nitai Gaur Prabhu
Hari Bol.
Just so the devotees may be watching online, you may see that the devotees take the garland off, which may seem a little unusual. And it's because the hyacinths have come into full bloom now, so the fragrance is completely overpowering. So if you see devotees take their garland off, it's not because they're disrespecting the person who's offered to them, or they're disrespecting the remnants of the Lord. But it's because it may make it difficult for them to speak because of the nature of the strength of the fragrance from the marigolds. are not the marigolds, the hyacinths. And it's nice, it's nice to know that that the deities are getting such wonderful offerings every day. Also, some devotees are allergic to particular flowers as well. Okay, so we're reading from the biography of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, chapter entitled India Unifying ISKCON. And Srila Prabhupada is in Mayapur in January 1976. And so this is Srila, this is Srila Prabhupada's description. This is Srila Prabhupada speaking to his disciples about his vision for the future development of the Mayapur project. So he was speaking in 1976. At that time there was just one or two buildings, a guest house, a temple, and one or two buildings and some farmland. Srila Prabhupada speaking. Centered around a cultural exposition building, the total village communal development will unfold. This central exposition building is the first phase of a many-phase plan. It will feature the world's largest planetarium, entitled the Temple of Understanding. This structure will be over 30 stories high and will house exhibits depicting all the levels of universal existence and all varieties of living conditions in all the planetary systems and exact details through lights, models, dioramas and murals. There will also be daily scheduled exhibits and tours for the public, and even a moving escalator taking the public to the upper levels of the exhibition building. The planetarium's exhibits on the various levels of existence in this world and beyond will be based on the scientific findings in the Vedic literatures, especially the Srimad Bhagavatam. This temple of understanding shall be surrounded by beautiful pathways, entrances, gardens and water reservoirs. 4-storied buildings, 1,000 feet long, will stand at the perimeter of the central area on all 4 sides. These will be used for teaching general and specialized branches of education from primary level to postgraduate level. Okay, so actually, no, this is not Srila Prabhupada speaking to his disciples. This is a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to the Chief Secretary of West Bengal, asking for help in acquiring land. In his letter, Srila Prabhupada referred to difficulties in purchasing land for ISKCON projects, since all the local landowners were escalating their prices far beyond the market value. If the government could make the land available at market prices, then ISKCON could immediately start its important work, officially inaugurating it on the birthday anniversary of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, March 16, 1976. In the meantime, Prabhupada was trying on his own to acquire enough land to begin. The Mayapur city project would require extensive funding and many years of work to develop, but it would proclaim the glories of Lord Chaitanya with unlimited potency. Mayapur would become famous, drawing people from all over the world to see the unique modern application of timeless Vedic wisdom. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Now we're reading from Srila Prabhupada Lila Mrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 17, chapter entitled The Lord Travels to Vrindavan. Text 104. Is that right? Is it 104?
It starts Brishan. Brishan Amasha Rosa Resha.
What number is it? What verse is it? Have you got the verse?
Just trying to find it.
As far as I know, it's 104.
104.
Sorry?
Oh no, he's got it on Bhagavatam. Is it Bhagavatam you're on?
No, it's Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Alright, so
Okay, anyway, I'll just go. So we're reading from Madhya Lila, text 100, chapter 17, 104. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare.
Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Okay, so I'll just go through it myself if no one's got the verse. Prakashananda Sripada Sapate Vasya Vedanta Padana Baho Shishyaganalaya. Prakashananda Sripada Sapate Vasya Vedanta Padana Bahu Shishyaganalaya. Prakashananda Sripada Sapate Vasya Vedanta Padana Bahu Shishyaganalaya. Please repeat. Prakashananda.
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 Sripad. A great sannyasi.
A great sannyasi.
Savate. In the assembly. Vasya. Sitting down. Vedanta. Vedanta philosophy. Pradana. Instructs. Bahu. Many. Shishyagana. Disciples. Laya. Taking. Translation. There was a great Mayavadi sannyasi named Prakashananda Saraswati. He used to teach Vedanta philosophy to a great assembly of followers. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Sripad Prakashananda Saraswati was a Mayavadi sannyasi, and his characteristics have been described in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Madhyakanda, chapter 3. Astapadamukhamora nahika lochan vedamori matakari vidamban kashite padaya veta prakashananda se veta karimori anga kanda kanda akanaye vedamora vigrahana mani savange haila kushta tabunai jani savayagya maya mora ye anga pavitra ajabhava adigaya yanhara charitra Punya pavitra tapaya ye anga parashe Tamityavali Veta Kemana Sahasi. In the Madhyakanda, chapter 20, it is said, Sanyasi Prakashananda Vasaye Kashite Morakanda Kanda Veta Kare Balamate Haraya Vedanta Mora Vigrana Mane Pushta Karirun Angi Tabunahi Jani Satyamora Lila Kama Satyamora Stan Iamitya Bali Mora Kare Kan. Being an impersonalist, Prakashananda Saraswati used to explain the absolute truth as being without hands, legs, mouths or eyes. In this way he used to cheat the people by denying the personal form of the Lord. Such a foolish person was Prakashananda Saraswati, whose only business was to sever the limbs of the Lord by proving the Lord impersonal. Although the Lord has form, Prakashananda Saraswati attempted to cut off the hands and legs of the Lord. This is the business of demons. The Vedas state that people who do not accept the Lord's form are rascals. The form of the Lord is factual, for Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita, Vidaishtra Savaya Hameva Vedya. When Krishna says aham, he says I am, which means I, the person. He adds the word eva, which is used for conclusive verification. Thus, by studying Vedanta philosophy, one must come to know the Supreme Person. Whoever describes Vedic knowledge as impersonal is a demon. One becomes successful in life by worshipping the form of the Lord. The Mayavadi sannyasis deny the form of the Lord, which delivers all fallen souls. Indeed, the Mayavadi demons try to cut this form to pieces. The personality of Godhead is worshipped by exalted demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. The original Mayavadi sannyasi Shankaracharya also accepted the fact that the Lord's form is transcendental, Narayano Paro Vyaktad. Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is beyond the Avyakta, the unmanifested material energy. Avyaktad Andasambhava. This material world is a creation of that unmanifested material energy. However, Narayan has his own eternal form, which is not created by the material energy. Simply by worshipping the form of the Lord, one is purified. However, Mayavadi sannyasis are impersonalist philosophers, and they describe the form of the Lord as Maya or false. How can one be purified by worshipping something false? Mayavadi philosophers have no sufficient reason for being impersonalists. They blindly follow a principle that cannot be supported by reason or argument. This was the situation with Prakashananda Saraswati, the chief Mayavadi sannyasi of Benares. He was supposed to teach Vedanta philosophy, but he would not accept the form of the Lord. Therefore he was attacked with leprosy. Nonetheless, he continued to commit sins by describing the absolute truth as impersonal. The absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, always displays pastimes and activities, but Mayavadi sannyasis claim that these activities are false. Some people falsely claim that Prakashananda Saraswati later became known as Prabodhananda Saraswati, but this is not a fact. Prabodhananda Saraswati was the uncle and spiritual master of Gopal Bhatta Goswami. In his Grihastha life, Prabodhananda Saraswati was a resident of Sri Rangashetra, and he belonged to the Vaishnava Ramanuja Sampradaya. It is a mistake to consider Prakashananda Saraswati and Prabodhananda Saraswati the same man. Amagyanatimrandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramalicam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamabhgadamaya Tadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupamasagrajatam Sahagana Raganatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Rijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivashakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinavamno Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kamta Radha Kantanamostate Taptikam Shadagaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakapatarubhyascha Kripasindhuyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the verse again. There was a great Mayavadi sannyasi named Prakashananda Saraswati who used to teach Vedanta philosophy to a great assembly of followers. So this section of Chaitanya Charitamrita is describing Lord Chaitanya's travels to Vrindavan accompanied by his servant Balabhadra Bhattacharya. So they've walked together through the Jharkhand forest from Bengal, and now they've come to the river Ganges of Kashi, Varanasi, Benares. And as soon as they arrived there, and by the Lord's arrangement, they met one very dear devotee of Lord Chaitanya called Tabana Mishra. And it seems that there were very few Vaishnavas in Varanasi at that time, not surprisingly, because even though Tabana Mishra was a pure devotee, and there was another pure devotee there, his friend Chandrasekhar, but they both expressed great sadness that no one was discussing Krishna Katha, no one was reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, but everyone was absorbed in discussing Mayavad philosophy, basically. And so for that, and here this in this verse, well, actually just before this verse, then one other devotee of Krishna who lived in Varanasi at that time, who's not named, but he's called the Maharashtrian Brahmin. So he was inviting Lord Chaitanya, but Lord Chaitanya didn't want to accept any invitations generally. But then Lord Chaitanya saw this as an opportunity to preach the correct understanding of Vedanta philosophy. So shortly after this, Lord Chaitanya did actually accept that invitation of the Maharashtrian Brahmin and preached to all of the disciples of Prakashananda Saraswati and Prakashananda Saraswati. But actually Lord Chaitanya, it seems, has been planning this pastime for a long time. Of course, the Supreme Lord doesn't have to spend many hours thinking how to preach to certain people, how to spread his mission. It's described as Satya Sankalpa, which means that just by desiring something, then by the potency of his energies, all the arrangements are made by his different energies. But in these verses from the Chaitanya Bhagavat, that Krishnadas Kaviraj puts these in his purport. So these verses were spoken by Lord Chaitanya to Murari Gupta in Navadri years before this event. And on that occasion, Vrindavan Das Thakur describes that while having a very intimate conversation with Murari Gupta, all of a sudden Lord Chaitanya manifested his Ishwara Bhav, and he adopted the mood of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he said, in Varanasi there is a sannyasi who is preaching Mayavadi philosophy, and he's cutting my body to pieces. And he says, I will destroy him. As he says that. He actually says, I'm giving him leprosy. He actually says that I am giving him leprosy. But as we know, Krishna, the Supreme Personality, so there we see an example of, like, at one moment, Lord Chaitanya was displaying his mood of compassion with Murari Gupta. If you read that pastime from the Chaitanya Bhagavat, you see he's very, very sweet and gentle with his disciple and encouraging him. And then the next moment it's like a thunderbolt, and he's going to destroy all of the Mayavadis. But then when he actually comes to Varanasi, then his mood of compassion comes again to the surface, and he wants to deliver them all. So this is why it's really important to study Srila Prabhupada's books regularly and extensively. Because if we don't read Srila Prabhupada's books, in all of his books, not just one book, but if we don't read all of his books and all of his purports regularly, then we'll just read small snippets and we'll be disturbed. If you just read that part that Lord Chaitanya is going to give someone leprosy, then you would be disturbed definitely. But it's very interesting because here in this purport, Srila Prabhupada says he was that Prakashananda Saraswati, he was the chief Mayavadi sannyasi of Benares. He was supposed to teach Vedanta philosophy, which means, and Vedanta philosophy is actually originally spoken by Srila Vyasadeva with the direct empowerment of Krishna. And just as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Savasya Janam Riddhi Sanavashto Matas Mritigyanam Aponam Cha Vedaischa Savayam Eva Vedyo Vedantaprid Veda Veda Eva Chaham. I am situated in everyone's heart as the super soul. From me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. By all of the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta. I am the knower of the Vedas and the compiler of the Vedanta. So there's nothing wrong that Prakashananda Saraswati was teaching Vedanta philosophy. But he had what Srila Prabhupada said, he had a poor fund of knowledge. And that at some stage in his disciplic succession, coming from Shankaracharya, who was also like a covered devotee of Krishna, at some point in that sampradaya, then the followers of Shankaracharya, they actually abandoned the correct understanding of the Vedanta, and it became more and more impersonal and more atheistic, to the stage where now, at this time in Varanasi, in the time of Lord Chaitanya, which just over 500 years ago, at that time it degraded to such a degree that when Lord Chaitanya came to Varanasi, when Lord Chaitanya, like the avatar of Krishna in Kali Yuga, came to a holy place, then the Brahmins weren't able to recognize him. And in fact, the leader of the Brahmins, Prakashananda Saraswati, actually derided him, said that he's just like a charlatan, he's a sentimentalist, he's just gathered a following of ignorant people who don't understand the purpose of Vedanta. He's worshipping, he's encouraging people to worship Krishna with singing and dancing. So Prakashananda Saraswati had become deviated from real Vedanta philosophy. And here Krishnadas Kaviraj says, Srila Prabhupada says, he would not accept the form of the Lord, therefore he was attacked with leprosy. So that statement might also seem like a sentimental kind of, very backward understanding of life. That people get diseases because they're blasphemous, or because they've been cursed by someone, or because they're committed some offense. That may seem like very inhuman or, surcharged with superstition, black magic, whatever. But actually, from that passage in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, we understand that this was part of Lord Chaitanya's plan to deliver Prakashananda. And this is reminiscent of. So anyway, we don't know. It's not described anywhere what the previous life of Prakashananda Saraswati, whether he was a devotee in his previous life and he became an impersonalist. We don't know. However, Lord Chaitanya sees everyone as his devotees. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Kabu Tabanoi Shravanavde Chitti Karayo Udoi. Krishna Prema is dormant in the heart of everyone, all living entities, and by the process of hearing and chanting about Krishna, then that original Krishna Prema is awoken. So actually, when Lord Chaitanya actually gave his darshan to Prakashananda, very quickly he was like attracted to Lord Chaitanya, and he said, you're so beautiful, you're like Narayan, and like very quickly his heart was purified. So yes, it's and then also there's a famous verse that Srila Prabhupada quotes often: Yasyaham anagrina mi harishya tadinam shanai. When one is trying to approach me through the process of devotional service, but there's some big impediment, some material desire that's blocking that devotion, then I remove that desire from the heart of my devotee. So the pastimes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the pastimes in Srimad Bhagavatam, they show ways in which Krishna makes arrangements through his devotees to remove the obstacles in the hearts of his devotees. So in that way we can see these. So whenever we read something which seems like very harsh or very difficult to accept, then we should immediately go to a devotee and say, what can I read to enable me to understand this? How can I understand that something which appears very cruel and impossible to accept? How can I understand this? And we don't. And if somebody comes to us with that question, if we don't know what the story is behind it, we shouldn't be afraid, thinking, "Oh, I don't know how to explain this." But we should just know that the answer is there somewhere. And even if the specific story is not there, even if, just as in this case, even if we don't know who Prakashananda Saraswati was in his previous life, but we can read other stories, or we can tell other stories about other devotees who were purified through many lifetimes, just like at the moment we're reading about Bharat Maharaj and Javat. So yes, and this is actually the duty of a disciple, is to approach their spiritual master with all questions of any doubts that are arising. And we shouldn't think, "Oh, I don't want to ask that question in case like the answer is not there. I'd rather just not ask that question." The issue may be so like disturbing that we don't really want to hear the answer. But actually, if we ask the right person in the right mood, then we can be sure that the answer will be very nice, it'll be very surprising, it'll be enlivening, it will help us. It may not be the answer that we expect, but in some way it will help us. So, but as I said, one way that we can gain that faith in the Shastra is to really, really read it. regularly and to take all opportunity to hear the Shastra from qualified people. So I'll stop there for a moment. Are there any questions on this section?
It was just a comment was Krishnadas Kaviraj warns in the pastime of Chota Haridas that Lord Chaitanya would sometimes exhibit quite kind of harsh behaviour, and then Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, but one should not become preoccupied with the Lord's external aspect, or he will be vanquished. So we have to proactively assert that the Lord is very kind and very merciful, and whatever He's doing is sometimes beyond our ability to appreciate, but everything He's doing is with the utmost love and concern for the living entity, and any inability on our behalf to appreciate that is something we have to just give up as an anartha and as an unwanted thing, really. As if we become preoccupied with it, then we'll be vanquished. It's of no use to dwell on that. We should just assert, no, the Lord's all merciful, He's all kind. Lord Chaitanya's heart is very, very soft. So therefore, I'm maybe not seeing this properly, not appreciating it, but I'm not going to allow that to obscure or eclipse my love and appreciation for Lord Chaitanya.
All right, thank you very much. Was there something that... Okay, thank you. Yeah, that? Yeah, well, I talked to Krishna there.
It's on this, it comes up on this, so they can hear it. There's a speaker on this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Krishna Guru. Yes, that's what I was trying to present, so thank you for clarifying it. So I also wanted to read a little bit from Krishna Lila, because the pastime which I was reading this week I felt was relevant to this verse. And it's the pastime of the Krishna and Balaram going to beg food from the wives, from the Brahmins, and then from the wives of the Brahmins. It's reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 23. The cowherd boy said, "Obeisances unto you, O wives of the learned Brahmins, kindly hear our words. We have been sent here by Lord Krishna, who is passing by, not far from here. He has come a long way with the cowherd boys and Lord Balaram tending the cows. Now he is hungry, so some food should be given for him and his companions." The wives of the Brahmins were always eager to see Krishna, for their minds had been enchanted by descriptions of him. Thus, as soon as they heard that he had come, they became very excited. Taking along in large vessels the 4 kinds of foods, full of fine tastes and aromas, all the ladies went forth to meet their beloved, just as rivers flow toward the sea. Although their husbands, brothers, sons, and other relatives tried to forbid them going, their hope of seeing Krishna, cultivated by extensive hearing of his transcendental qualities, won out. Along the river Yamuna, within a garden decorated with buds of Ashoka trees, they caught sight of him strolling along in the company of the cowherd boys and his elder brother Balaram. His complexion was dark blue and his garment golden. Wearing a peacock feather, coloured minerals, sprigs of flower buds, and a garland of forest flowers and leaves, he was dressed just like a dramatic dancer. He rested one hand upon the shoulder of a friend, and with the other twirled a lotus. Lilies graced his ears, his hair hung down over his cheeks, and his lotus-like face was smiling. O ruler of men, for a long time those Brahmin ladies had heard about Krishna, their beloved, and his glories had become the constant ornaments of their ears. Indeed, their minds were always absorbed in him. Through the apertures of their eyes, they now forced him to enter within their hearts, and then they embraced him for a long time. In this way, they finally gave up the pain of separation from him, just as sages give up the anxiety of false ego by embracing their innermost consciousness. Lord Krishna, who witnesses the thoughts of all creatures, understood how those ladies had abandoned all worldly hopes and come there simply to see him. Thus he addressed them as follows with a smile upon his face. Lord Krishna said, "Welcome, O most fortunate ladies. Please sit down and make yourselves comfortable. What can I do for you? That you have come here to see me is most appropriate." Certainly expert personalities who can see their own true interest render unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service directly unto me, for I am most dear to the soul. It is only by contact with the self that one's vital breath, intelligence, mind, friends, body, wife, children, wealth, and so on are dear. Therefore, what object can possibly be more dear than one's own self? You should thus return to the sacrificial arena, because your husbands, the learned Brahmins, are householders and need your assistance to finish their respective sacrifices. The wives of the Brahmins replied, "O Almighty One, please do not speak such cruel words. Rather, you should fulfill your promise that you always reciprocate with your devotees in kind. Now that we have attained your lotus feet, we simply wish to remain here in the forest so we may carry upon our heads the garlands of tulsi leaves you may neglectfully kick away with your lotus feet. We are ready to give up all material relationships. Our husbands, fathers, sons, brothers, other relatives and friends will no longer take us back, and how could anyone else be willing to give us shelter? Therefore, since we have thrown ourselves at your lotus feet and have no other destination, please, O chastiser of enemies, grant our desire." Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, "Rest assured that your husbands will not be inimical towards you, nor will your fathers, brothers, sons, other relatives, or the general populace. I will personally advise them of the situation. Indeed, even the demigods will express their approval. For you to remain in my bodily association will certainly not please me in this world, nor would it be the best way for you to increase your love for me. Rather, you should fix your minds on me, and very soon you will achieve me. It is by hearing about me, seeing my deity form, meditating upon me, and chanting my names and glories, that love for me develops, not by physical proximity. Therefore, please go back to your homes." Shukadeva Goswami said, "Thus instructed the wives of the Brahmins returned to the place of sacrifice. The Brahmins did not find any fault with their wives, and together with them they finished the sacrifice." So here is another example of how Krishna made an arrangement for his devotees by changing the minds of the Brahmins of their opinion of their wives, and the Brahmins become so remorseful. They say, "We have sinned, for we have denied the request of the two lords of the universe, who deceptively appeared as ordinary human beings." Taking note of their wives' pure transcendental devotion for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and seeing their own lack of devotion, the Brahmins felt most sorrowful and began to condemn themselves. The Brahmins said, "To hell with our threefold birth, our vow of celibacy, and our extensive learning. To hell with our aristocratic background and our expertise in the rituals of sacrifice. These are all condemned because we were inimical to the transcendental personality of Godhead. Just see the unlimited love these women have developed for Lord Krishna, the spiritual master of the entire universe. This love has broken for them the very bonds of death." So
I thought it was interesting to reflect on how Krishna, as the Super Soul, intervenes And although normally the Brahmins would have been very angry that their wives had gone and given all the food away, Krishna assured them that they wouldn't be. So it's interesting, isn't it, how although the living entity has free will, still the Lord can come in and he can orchestrate things in such a way that people will be made malleable toward whatever way the pastime needs to go. Same with Kamsa. Kamsa was reflecting on how he wanted to kill Devaki while she was pregnant. He's having this internal conflict going on between him and the super soul. The super soul is saying, no, you can't do that. That's just outrageous, And although he wanted to, he wasn't allowed. So it's interesting, isn't it, that even people who are inimical or demoniac, still they can fall under the sway of the influence of the Lord, if the Lord wants that to happen.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the Brahmins said that it wasn't they kind of say it wasn't our fault that we didn't recognise them in one sense, or where is it? They said that Krishna and Balarama had disguised themselves. We have sinned, for we have denied the request of the two lords of the universe, who deceptively appeared as ordinary human beings. But in the purport, said that Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram did not try to deceive the Brahmins, but they thought they'd been deceived because they had no previous knowledge of Krishna, of the Supreme Lord as being like Krishna and Balaram. They were thinking of Lord Narayan or Vishnu. So similarly, Lord Chaitanya in this pastime with the Vaishnavas of Varanasi and the Mayavadis of Varanasi, and he's protecting his devotees. He's protecting his devotees from the association of these persons who become completely bewildered by Mayavad philosophy, and he's saying that this teaching, it's cutting my body to pieces. It's destroying knowledge of my personal form. It's destroying, and even more important than that, it's destroying it's taking away the opportunity for people to hear the pastimes of Krishna. And in this pastime with the Brahmins' wives, then Krishna actually says that, or it's actually just Shukadev Goswami says that the reason that the wives of the Brahmins were so attracted to Krishna that they were willing to leave their husbands and face ridicule from their family members was because they'd been listening to Krishna's pastimes for a very long time, and that had actually brought them to the platform of a Shakti, of spontaneous attachment. And right in the very last verse of the chapter, it said that the Brahmins, reflecting on the sin they had committed by neglecting Lord Krishna, they became very eager to see him, but being afraid of King Kamsa, they did not dare go to Raj. So they were just on the platform. They were still on the platform of Anarta and Vritti, but they had an aspiration. They were aspiring to see Krishna. So when Lord Chaitanya exhibited his anger and defeated the pride of the Mayavadi sannyasis, then he was protecting his devotees who weren't. It's described that Tapna Mishra and Chandrasekhara Vaidya, Srila Prabhupada describes them as neophyte devotees in the sense that they didn't have such a strong knowledge of Shastra to by themselves be able to defeat the arguments of the Mayavadis, and therefore they were very disturbed by that association. So that's also an encouragement to us to really study the Shastras, that because Srila Prabhupada wanted us to become sufficiently learned that we could actually become preachers and actually defeat the Mayavadi philosophy, but not for the purpose of expecting that we can convert the Mayavadis, but rather to protect the innocent people who have to be exposed to that philosophy. And in the world today, everyone, anyone who can read English, anyone who can use a computer, they're constantly being bombarded by Mayavadi philosophy. And that Mayavadi philosophy, it kind of disguises itself through political correctness and through social equality and all kinds of liberation, disguises, but ultimately behind it, well, we don't know who's behind it, but certainly throughout history, warlords and very corrupt governments have used philosophical teachings and religious teachings to promote their agendas. And Srila Prabhupada, therefore, he said that actually this Krishna consciousness movement will save the world. And it's not necessarily that it's going to save the world through cow protection or save the world through farming communities, but it's saving the world by protecting people from this insidious impersonalism which prevents people hearing the pastimes of Krishna. Because that's what Shukadeva Goswami says here, that the reason that the wives of the Brahmins had so much courage to go and to satisfy Krishna and Balaram, the reason they had that much courage was because their hearts had been purified by hearing and chanting. So we definitely live in a world now where we all need a lot of courage. And whether our focus is on just helping a small number of people in our family become stronger spiritually, or whether it's on saving the world from climate change crisis or saving the cows from slaughterhouses, whatever it is, and we need that kind of determination that the wives of the Brahmins had. So we need to really we need to become strong enough that we can not just defeat the impersonalism in our own hearts, but we can actually be ready, if called upon, to defeat the impersonalism which is kind of ravaging so-called intellectual society. It's nice how these kind of difficult situations in the world, like COVID and climate change and animal rights issues, it's nice how they're forcing us to look into Shastra and get the nourishment that we need to make the personal changes as well as the changes on the level of society. Are there any questions online? Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premananda.
Vasi Guru ki, Jai.
Natpati Vaishnavrinda ki, Jai.